So this is series number 6, which we are going to cover land and waterfront properties. And Gray Shriver or Burr is here. He's going to lead us with this because Greg has so much experience. How many years you been doing this? Since 1998. So I have 20 years. You are 20. Do the math. Yeah. Okay. Do the math. 23 years. And so I think between the two of us, we have some good experience to share. We wanted this to just be a talk and just to be an open conversation. We didn't do the slides, but we just felt like this is going to flow on its own.
It's a discussion. We're obviously always available afterwards to speak, but we just want to have a basic discussion about what to look for when selling, buying waterfront and with land, and then we can open it up to the floor and answer any questions and go for it.
So when Greg and I started talking about these two topics, we had said that there's so much to this, and it's so deep in many levels that a lot of this may seem basic to some, and if you've never done land, if you've never done the waterfront, it may not seem so basic. So we thought we keep it in that aspect of top level information. And as Greg just said, if you want more information, give us a shout. We're here to answer any questions. So take it away.
All right. Well, basically, when you're selling waterfront, you're selling a lifestyle. What are your hot buttons? Pretty much the same. The buyer, why the seller bought that property, pretty much your buyer is going to hone in on that. Is it beachfront? Is it lakefront? What does that look like? So if you are listing a waterfront property, the exterior has to be as tight as the interior, if not more. Whether that be through video, pictures, staging the exterior is important. One other thing is when you are listing a property and you are speaking to buyers, you must vet them. You must ask them what their buyer is looking for, what type of water, what are they looking for as far as that, say, that waterfront property on the lake. Are they boaters? Are they fish? Are they looking to fish? What are they looking to do? Get real granular with that. So it's important to vet the buyers on that front. Also, you've got to know there's so much more to learn, to know about, whether it be the dock, whether it be the shoreline, the seawall, fixed bridges, access to the Gulf. But again, what's important to the buyer.
And let's break that down real fast. So I know from selling waterfront, I've had people that wanted lake parking.
Yeah.
And you and I chatted and laughed about that because I have had so many people say to me, so you can get to the Gulf, right? No. You cannot get to the Gulf of Mexico via Lake Tarpon by boat. Now, water flows through, however, you won't. So just know that Lake Tarpon has so many positive features to it. Learn what they are. If you're going to sell a piece of property, waterfront or not, just know the details. So Lake Tarpon, it has boat access if your property doesn't. Most of them don't have dockage, but if yours does have dockage and lifts and so forth, that's awesome. There's value to that. But know that there is a state park right there that you can put your boats into Lake Tarpon. There's a restaurant on the lake that you can take your boat to and so forth. It's a fabulous fishing lake. Some people have water speed, although the alligators might get you. I've done that. I've survived it. So you have lake. You have many lakes in Florida as well. So it's not just this area.
It's Odessa, Land Lakes. Again, it's really getting granular with your buyer. What is it that they're looking for? Ski lake. How big is their boat?
Right.
Do they just want to simply the dock? One thing we always talk to our waterfront folks, the lake, is we've got to make sure the dock is to walk the dock. You can see it, that the shoreline is clean, that the shoreline is tight. Because again, the exterior is going to be huge, and that's got to be tight as well.
And something else about lakefront living too, it can be buggy. So go there and check out the different times during the day. I know Lake Tarpon, I've seen my sign out on the water and you could not make out what the sign looked like. It can be buggy. Notice too, with some lakes, they are, what are we calling that? Where it drains. So if it gets to a certain level, it automatically will drain. I know Lake Tarpon is built that way as well. So people get a little nervous about it overflowing. It's maintained. So that's something to know in any lakefront.
Make sure, may seem small, but make sure your windows are clean. You know, when we walk in, and usually it's going to be that wide open view.
Yeah.
Some of the windows are nasty. Make sure they're clean. Talk about pricing a little bit.
Sure.
Pricing that you may have to, your comps may not be readily available within 1 mile, for example. So you may have to stretch it out 2 miles. You have to go 3 miles. You have to go 5 miles. And it's going to be a lot more detailed.
Okay.
There may be an inferior lake as opposed to the lake that you're selling on. Another big thing now is going to be flood insurance. Flood insurance is seriously pricing.
You got it.
Out of the market.
Go ahead. Eat.
But flood insurance is pricing people out of the market. Just talking to Florida Best Quote, and they have a $13,000 quote down in Crystal Beach. So I mean, don't know where we're going to go with that, but they, we lean on them for our quotes before to make sure, even though you're dealing with luxury, everybody's got a price point and a tipping point, and want to get rid of that.
I love that you just said that, because anytime, and this is waterfront or not waterfront, you should be getting quotes if you're in a flood zone, because that's the first thing a buyer is going to ask you. I noticed that you're in an X zone. What does the current homeowner pay? Because not all of them, but some of them are transferable to flood insurance policies. So Florida Best Quote, they're so good to us here at KW that they will give you a quote. So I know when I list a waterfront property or in a flood zone, I have them quote for today's current current flood maps. So that's real important. So just have that information. Just as Greg is saying, just be prepared that when you list this waterfront property, you know what you're talking about. And flood is absolutely #1 right now.
Flood is huge. Also, too, seawalls, going to come across seawalls. They are, you should have a seawall inspected every 3 to 5 years. A lot of folks don't, but that is what we've come across, especially if you're dealing with out Lake Keystone, or folks have been on this property for 30 or 40 years. To them it works, it's fine. But then when you get to the inspection, and it kind of blows up, but becomes an issue. So we try to do is at the listing appointment is say, hey, let's kind of, you don't have to get the whole house inspected, but let's get that seawall inspected and get out in front of that just in case. The question is, was the last time you had it inspected? 15 years ago. Well, I think you should get that inspected. Average is about 3 to 5 years, but that's important.
And if you don't have the contact people for seawalls, flood insurance and so forth, call someone who specializes in waterfront, because I know I was in a situation once and I had that exact scenario, listed the property, mentioned the seawall, saw that the seawall was coming apart. And before we even put it on the market, we had it addressed. It did have some issues. We got quotes on what it would cost because we were in front of the problem, so that when we finally put it on the market, we were prepared.
It can be scary for buyers, and that's the conversation we have with sellers is, hey, look at, let's try and make this as seamless as possible. Might cost you a few bucks in the beginning, but it'll save you in the end. And then, people
Right.
coming down from up north, they're not familiar
They
with
don't know.
seawalls and stuff like
Right.
that. All they're doing is Googling and getting scared. So
Right.
we try to take that,
Right.
take that out of the picture.
Same with dockage, right?
Dockage, yep, the dockage should be not only walkable, but if it needs repaired, it 100% has to be repaired before you go on market. Because again, we're selling the exterior as much as we are in the interior, and that just looks terrible in pictures and video. And again, can't emphasize enough with the shoreline being clean and clear. And we like to say if if the photo and video are king, the narrative has to be the queen. Okay, so with the narrative, again, the narrative has to be a strong, well-written narrative. And don't be afraid to use the attachments to go further and in more detail, because the more you can paint that picture for the buyer. And again, we lean on the seller, on every listing, tell me what you love about this house. I love going to having my coffee at sunset on Lake Keystone, whatever it is. But just make sure you have a well-written narrative. And of course, the videos and the photos are paramount as well.
So back to that dockage, lifts are important. Does it work? First of all, how old is the lift?
Yeah.
Was that maintained? Get all the records when it comes to this, because this is expensive equipment.
The water depth is huge. How deep is the water?
Tides.
Size of the boat that can be fit in there. I mean, you want to do a lot of that stuff up front. So because you're going to be appealing to a particular buyer, especially if you have a home that can fit a 50-foot boat, that's going to just jump right at somebody. So you want that front and center.
And check out the tides. I had a listing where it had a dock that was exciting. It was in Crystal Beach. And the observant, what does everybody else have? Have you ever, especially Tarpon Springs, looked down at from an aerial and you see all these docks, but you see no boats? Wonder why? Because it's so low most of the time. The shallow water doesn't enable them to have a certain type of boats. They may have a lift. So if you've ever looked along Clearwater, on inside Clearwater, not Clearwater Beach, Clearwater, and you see these like 10-mile docks coming out.
Yeah.
Check to see, why are they going out that far? Well, it's the tide, So the one that I had in Crystal Beach, you couldn't bring a boat into it because it was so shallow during high tide. And these are definitely things that you have to be asking the homeowner. Have your checklist of questions. And my question was, did you ever have a boat? I noticed your neighbor has a boat. Tell me about the tides. Tell me, and you can usually see it because look at the seawalls. If you're at high tide, the water's all the way up, of course. And the low tide, you can see, the staining on the wall. And there's no way you're getting a 50-foot boat into that. So, and then my next question to them was, how big was the boat you had? Well, we had a 24-foot boat. How often did you come in and out? Was it tidal driven? Your access? Oh, absolutely. We could only come in at certain times. That's important to know, right?
You gotta, and again, you've got to know these things because when you're speaking to the buyer and the buyer's agent, these people are going to be particular. They're probably going to be boaters. They're going to know everything up and down.
Right.
So you got to be sort of encyclopedic with this stuff. Boom, 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 and spout it out. Again, it's going to save you time because if it's they're on their way doing their due diligence. It gets frustrating, but you should know that the listing agent.
I just thought of something else too. How about when communities own dockage? There's townhomes in Tarpon Springs, Point Tarpon, where it shows that each particular townhome has the dockage, but they don't actually own it. Find that out, because is it deeded, which would be in the tax records, or does the community own the dockage? So there's some sketchy things going on out there. I always find them. So you have to ask those questions. Talk to the association. Who owns that dock? Is there a fee? Because in that particular community, there's a $500 a year additional fee for the community dockage. Let's talk about condos. There's condos that certain condo would own dockage. Do they own it, or is the community who's owning it and leasing it back? If you're looking at a condo situation and has something coming up soon, ask the questions as far as this boat dock lift, that can it be leased out? Who is the owner? Is the owner, again, the condo owner, can they lease that to someone inside and outside of that community? Know the rules, because someone may be buying that. Can you buying it for that reason? Can you sell it to someone else in the community? It's a nice little investment right there. So lots of questions, lots of things to know when you're going into, especially a condo community. There's more rules. But
especially if you're, I mean, you can get access, get all the rules and regulations, put them up on MLS, so you can point to people, so they have everything, and it's, people aren't hunting packing for things. And even if the seller has to pay for them or whatever, because get it up there, make your life a heck of a lot easier.
right,
To try and say, well, you told me this, you told me that. It's like, no, here it is, black and white.
exactly. So we talked about lake, we talked about, let's talk about the Gulf. So know your language. St. Joseph Sound is not the Gulf of Mexico. I see that all the time. Beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful Gulf views. You're not looking at the Gulf. So, and that's easy to determine by look at a map. It says St. Joseph Sound. Know what a canal is. Know that if that canal, especially up in the Newport Richey, Pasco County area, there's a lot of bridges.
Yeah.
You have to go into. Look at Dunedin, these little canals. They're so shallow. You can't even get a boat in and out of them. But if you're going in high tide, woohoo, we have waterfront. I'm so excited. And then you go back in 6, 8, 10 hours, there's no water there.
Know your time too as well, besides fixed bridges. We saw a few on the Anklote, and well, how long does it take to get out to the Gulf?
Yeah,
45 minutes, maybe, but know that, talk to people in the area, but that's important. And again, people that are
Very
buying waterfront for a boaters, they're gonna be very, they're gonna ask the right questions.
you would hope.
Yeah.
And wannabe voters. I just sold a beautiful lot on Anklote at River. And it was actually not even Anklote River, so I'm correcting myself. It was Lake Jasmine. And I had to clarify that we are getting out to the Gulf, right? So the homeowner and I sat down and he showed me his path to see as a boat and so forth. And the reason that was important is because when I went to talk about that with a buyer, they weren't coming in thinking that, in 5 minutes, they're out in the Gulf fishing, which that's a story in itself. You can't fish right out in 5 minutes. So the point of this is know what you're selling, right? And if you're going to be telling someone, okay, you are aware that this leads to this, has a bridge, you might want to get that in an email confirmation too, so that they don't move in and say, I had to sell my boat because I couldn't get underneath that bridge on Alt 19.
We've even gone out with sellers, like, all right, 10 you're from Missouri, I'm like, show me, let's go, jump in the boat and take me out there to help me, get me.
Great idea.
Yeah, so, and again, we're partners, our whole deal is, we're partners in this deal, help me, help you, basically.
Absolutely.
And again, when it comes to water's a little bit of a different animal, and you don't want to say something again, hey, he told me I can get out there and I can have this, and
Right.
all that stuff, so eliminate that.
I love that. Know this too. What direction does the sun rise and fall? We're laughing, but isn't that true?
It's like the lake dog.
I just came from a listing appointment and it was a condo and 6th floor, the highest in there, and it was a spectacular view. But know what the view, is it facing north? Is it facing south? Are you really getting the sunsets? You do know that the sun moves, so sometimes you may not get that sun setting because it's gonna go behind all the buildings at a certain point. But know this stuff and market it properly.
We do, and we sell down in Miami. It's a big, going your views and where you, where you face, southeast, west. And you sell down there, you sell, well, I want direct ocean. I'm like, okay, great, but have you been at 8 o'clock at night? You know what you're looking at? So,
Right.
The southeast view, maybe get the city lights, things
Right.
like that. So your directions are important. Your lines in a building, if you're selling in a condo, what line are you selling? What's the most popular line? Why? especially obviously on this coast, the west coast, sunsets and stuff, and it'll probably cost you, you know, that people, I want a direct goal view. I'm like, okay, but it's not your budget, but $200,000 less, go on this side, and you know, you might have a little bit of a north beach, but
Right.
so
Right.
think a little bit outside the box too.
And with that same thought, in a condo scenario, you probably know this, however, every level going up adds value, it's more money. Is it 10 to 15,000? What's it today?
It could, yeah.
Depending on where.
Yeah, it depends on where and what you're going over. You know, if you're going from the 12th floor and you go into the 16th floor and that takes you over another building, obviously that's probably going to be more in the 10 to 15 range. But if you're going at one in Miami, it's a 4th floor difference, but the view is not that much of a difference. So we're not putting 10 to 15 grand on top of that. It's more like 5 grand. Be conservative.
And I love that you just said this too, because I just had a request to give an idea of value in Miami, and it was a family situation, and I don't know Miami. I don't know where, what, how. I went to Greg, and thankfully enough, while he was on vacation, and he sent me a whole comparable analysis of that building, where it faces, the height, the level, and so forth. And I was so excited to pass that on because I looked really good. Give you full credit on that.
Yeah, you got to be careful too. In situations like that, even down, look at the lot next to you, look at it in front of you, especially down in Miami. I remember, you know, 10, 15, you know, you have a building, but then there's an empty lot right in front of you.
Oh, yeah.
So there goes your view. I mean, so know your areas, take a look around, and that comes in, you become the expert. I guess.
Yeah. And when it comes to land on water and land in general, just know when you're selling or you're representing the buyer, or even you're the listing agent, know what has to be done in order to prep that land. In a recent situation I had in selling land, I asked the homeowner, did you do a soil test? Have you brought in any dirt? What have you done to prep this? Do we have water? Do we have electricity? These are questions that you're going to be asked, right? So we went under contract on this land, and the buyer has due diligence. You got to give them enough time to do their due diligence. This isn't a 5-day thing. So in due diligence, he found out he was a little behind as well, this buyer, on his research. He came back and said, my builder said that I'm going to need over $100,000 in dirt fill. And of course, he wanted to renegotiate that because he wasn't ready. Thankfully, my seller knew this was coming, and because he's a builder, so we worked that out. However, this is what happens, especially that due diligence. I learned for myself the hard way with due diligence. You really have to give them some time.
You've got to give them time, and you've got to don't assume, especially with utilities. You may, hey, we're 10 miles from, we're right in the neighborhood here, they've got to have cable. And I've been in a situation where there's no cable, there's no fiber optics, there was nothing. So again, you've got to ask those questions. You've got to make sure that you give the buyer enough due diligence. Got to be careful what you say again. The survey property is huge. Got to know what you're selling, obviously. We talk to neighbors sometimes, especially when you get into big properties and acreage. If you can find them, talk to them, see who they are, know what your buyer is going to do with it, what he wants to do with it, or she, and make sure it's available. But again, you got to be careful what you're saying too, because you can point them in a direction, but you can't say, "Oh, Greg said that I could do this," and then can't. So it's a lot more work. But
And if you're representing the buyer, what's the buyer's intention with that land? Is it zoned for what the buyer wants to do? I had one where she wanted, I guess she was really into HGTV. She wanted to put one of those little tiny metal boxes, tiny houses on it. And I had her call the county to make sure that she could do what she was trying to do. And crazy enough, in Ozona, she was able to do it. But I wanted to make sure that she heard that directly from the county as to whatever she wanted to put in was doable.
And you've got to, also too, if you're gonna turn, what's the cost of turning raw land into developable? It's a lot. It's the one thing I would say is if it's not a very cut and dry type of deal, we have a strategic partner that we just give it to. We just sold the golf course up in Brooksville. We had a client, he wanted this big, he wants to build a school out there, blah, blah, blah. Out of my pay grade. So we go right to our strategic partner up with him, he takes care of it. There's a lot to it. So if it does get start getting a little bit nervous about it, I just pivot
Right.
out and partner with somebody that does that, especially when it comes to the bigger stuff and when people want to develop and get into all that. 'Cause that's not
Absolutely.
it's not just a 3 month, or 30 days. That's due diligence could be 6 months. So
Yeah.
know what you're getting in.
Absolutely.
Zoning. I know what it's zoned for. Super important.
And if you don't know what you're looking at, what do you do? And who would that be? Yeah, that's us.
Yeah.
Call the county, ask the questions. It says here, architect or agricultural, it says here something, well, what does agricultural mean, and just call the source, get that information.
Restrictions, again, kind of goes in with zoning as well. We'll figure out what that is, what over soil. As far as listing and selling land, just be careful with it. That's all I can say. It can get you can go down that rabbit hole and get yourself in trouble. So if you get into a piece of, there's people that just sell land, obviously, like people that just sell commercial properties. It's a specialty. I know we think we can do everything, but just be careful what you're doing there.
Sure, and Donna Sue Hockey, she specializes in farmland. And we tried to get her to join us, but she could not. But you have questions about farmland, give her a call. That's her livelihood, and she knows probably more than most of us about farmland. There's a lot to know about that, as far as how many animals you can have, how many horses, how many, just so much. Mhm. Yeah, anyone have any questions at this point?
I don't know if you mentioned mangroves,
Ooh,
but I got into a situation with a waterfront property in Alexis Point, I think it was.
Mhm.
They wanted to build a dock, and the neighbors had a dock on both sides of the house. There were tons of mangroves, and they could not build a dock because they couldn't tear down the mangroves.
A lot of folks
Protect it.
don't understand that, especially coming from out of town up north, so that's super important. You can't.
You cannot tear those, you can't tear them down to build a dock.
Right.
And that's also too, if you are to kind of piggyback on that, if you are, Odessa, for example, what keeps Odessa so kind of cool and pristine to where it's at is you can't just go in there and tear something down and build up on it. Okay, they're very super strict about things like that. You can only go one story, you can't go up. So again, we had a situation like that, pointed the people towards the county, which you got to talk to. Here's the rules. Here's what you can do, you can't do. But it's old. I want to tear it down. I want to do this.
Yeah, mangroves, great point in that, because I know we've had so many issues in the past of cutting them down. And it's interesting because you look at the neighbor and it's nicely manicured mangroves. Ooh, how did they do that? Probably illegally. Ask them, how are you getting that done? But you have to be careful with that. And I've heard in certain cases, the county permitted the cutting of the mangroves for different things. So we go back to the county or the city again and asking about that. But yeah, I love when the neighbors have none and you have all of them. Yeah, someone then got fined along the way, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's important.
So, yeah.
Anyone else come upon a certain situation with the waterfront? No? Do you want to come upon a certain situation? Okay. So I guess what the bottom line here is, it's like anything in real estate, go to the source. Go to another agent if you're not sure, and it can be really tricky, especially when you have someone, as we're saying, coming from out of state. They may be on a lake up in New York, and it's totally different down here as to what they want to do and how they want to do it. And you cannot always put a dock on your property. It has to be permitted. They had a freeze at one point, years ago, on permits for dockage. Just know, before you put it on the market, know before you have your client sign up for that, if that's what they want. We already said, ask what they want to achieve with that. You know, well, I want to be able to fish, I want to be able to put my jet skis here. How are you getting the jet skis in, right? There's some, we just penned it one that the community, certain owners within this community had the deed to another location of a, well, they're calling it a community, what do we call it? Launch. How cool is that, you know, and that was worth something to many of the buyers, but having a private launch. So questions there, can you keep your boat there, can you not?
And know where your, if building a condo, for example, is waterfront, but there is no, they don't allow boats, where's the nearest marina? Where's
Right.
the nearest launch, you know?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, especially if you're selling luxury properties, say Point Seaside Sanctuary area, they don't have dockage right there. So that was the number one question for people who are coming from out of town. Where's the closest marina? And then they're gonna start asking you questions. Well, what would it cost me to keep my boat there? Just have the information ready, you know, no one's gonna hold you to that you have a 50-foot boat and it's so much per foot for the boat and this is what it's gonna cost you. However, have an idea, just point them in the right direction. You know, well, we have a beach here, as you would with any. Here's the Fred Howard, here's this. Here are the boat launches. Here are the marinas in the area.
I think it's important to check with the HOA too, because like I've sold in Tarpon Key and they have a community boat storage and boat ramp. But there's an 8-month to 12-month waiting list, to put your boat there because there's so many boats there now.
Sure.
When the builder built that community, they only allowed for like 20 boats and there's like 50 houses.
Right.
So there's a waiting list. And if you would not know that unless you check with the HOA,
Sure.
and that's important if somebody's buying this house based on, oh, I can keep my boat down there.
That's right.
And then all of a sudden they find out that there's an 8 to 12-month waiting period to put your boat down there,
Right.
Definitely,
you know?
I don't know, especially, well, any condo listing we have, or especially when it comes to water, and there's a community, and there's condo docks, and there's rules and regulations, do yourself a favor and get those up front and can't stress enough. Put them on MLS, because, you know, you get yourself in trouble interpreting what you made or thought. So you put that up there, direct them there, there's the rules and regulations. Call this person, whatever it may be, but be careful.
There are certain cities that also offer dockage at their marinas. If you're a owner of a Dunedin property, you can put yourself on that long list of the marina there, downtown Dunedin. I don't know if you all know that. It's a long list, but I have friends who have their boats there. So
You still have to pay for it.
you should.
But
Do you know how much that is? It's pennies on a dollar of what you would pay at a real marina. You know?
Yeah.
Pennies
Yeah.
on the
I
dollar.
don't think it's very, I don't think it's very expensive.
They're only so big, so you
Right,
know the different types of boats too.
right.
And that's important to be asking. What type of boat can you come through here? You know, there's a lot of protected areas.
So also, if you're kind of go off of that, besides boats, if you are selling luxury condos, not so quite sure up here, but I know down, like, we're selling one down in Miami, it's downtown, but they just started this January 1st, is they partnered with the beach club down in South Beach. So you get owners have free range and free use of the beach. I mean, huge value add down there. So little things like that, just always make sure you know the building, not just what's in there, the gym, blah, 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 what else it offers.
Right.
Those all.
And as we said earlier, not everybody gets that boat dock in the community. So just because the community's showing, you drive in and you see all these boats and boats, this is awesome to live here and have a boat dock. Not all units have the rights to them or are deeded them. Did we cover enough or anything that? Any questions? Anyone have a listing with Waterfront or dockage or anything?
I'll be on Friday. I'll go Friday.
Again, I want to Gulf Harbors.
Okay, good. Same thing, make sure you can get under the bridges, anything like that, so important. And there's a townhome community, what's the name of it, that's in Tarpon Springs.
Calista Cay.
Calista Cay. You gotta be careful because you cannot, you have to have it, you can get under that Alt 19 bridge, you just can't have any
Not
type
with a
of.
sailboat.
Not with a sailboat or anything, fly bridge, anything that has something that cannot be brought down.
Right.
But if you don't know that, you're gonna find yourself in trouble. As they're bringing this big old boat in saying, ooh, we have dockage, but we can't get it out of the marina. Yeah. So we try to cover as much topical things as far as that, but there's a lot involved in this. So if you have a situation, talk to the homeowner first, clarify with the county, homeowners association or management company, just make sure what you're selling, you know what you're selling, always get copies of the flood policies that they have, in addition to just their regular house policy, the deck pages, and don't get involved in boat sales. I had a situation once, learn my lesson, 20 years teaches you a lot. And seller included the boat that's in the garage. And it was on the water, however, this boat was on the trailer in the garage. So comes to be that when they saw it during an open house, there were 2 boats in the garage. So they removed one of them. Of course, the buyer thought they were getting the better boat. Oh, so that turned into a mess. So we got it straightened out, but just know, don't get into boat sales. Don't get into, oh, Karen, I thought of you. No, you did good. We'll take care of that. But yeah, be careful with that. Same with furniture, like just consider the furniture rule, Yep, that's off to the side, not between the 2 of you.
Please make sure again, to go over it, can't go over it enough after speaking with Florida Best quote today. Some sellers don't have insurance. They don't hold flood insurance.
Why is
But-
that?
Because they don't need it.
Why don't they need it?
They own it outright. No
Because
mortgage.
they own it outright.
Yeah, so what you really want to do, even before that, have them give you a quote, so you have it there, because you're gonna get a question. Or ask your seller if they don't have it, go to your insurance company, get it, and so you have that to share, because buyers are gonna add in smart buyer's agent, or buyer's gonna ask right now, because flood is, insurance period is through the roof.
Mhm.
I don't care how much, how many millions of dollars you have, and if you're financing, you're gonna need it.
Right.
Everybody's got there, you can't spend other people's money.
Right. Yeah, as he said that, if you're cash, you don't have to carry the flood insurance. You have to carry insurance at all. Should, however, that's why that's important. And what else about the house when you're on water, as far as, still elevation?
Elevation, for the square footage, not included, bottom part. And yeah, that's why we talk with Jason a lot, Florida Best quote. Because again, it's very, I have him speak directly with my people. So I'm like, look, he can articulate it a lot better. It's complicated, it's getting more complicated. And Jason will gladly speak to the client and smooth it over.
So what we're talking about is when you're in a flood zone, you have to build a stilt home. You have to be so many feet above in elevation. So you ever see when they enclose it, a lot of people think that they can then make their rec rooms or man caves and things like that. And if the insurance company finds out when you're in that situation, they will make you rip it out and they will fine you. So you see that a lot. Do you remember the one time, Crystal Beach and Ozona? I tell everyone this every time, just tick off a neighbor. They will call you out to the county within seconds.
Yes.
And I've seen it happen where they had this beautiful bar down there and bedrooms and bathrooms. You're not allowed to do it. An indicator is the kick out. Have you ever seen them? They just look like little holes. It's actually like one less block in the wall. And then they have like slats or a screen that's so that the water naturally can flow through. That's why they don't want you to have the furniture and things down there so that there's rising water during a storm. It will flow out. So all your stuff's gonna be floating down, Pennsylvania or Mayo. But that's why. So if you ever question it and you're in the home, look for those kickouts. If you see that they're covered, ask that question. Why is that covered? Tell your buyer this could be an issue because this is illegal. It's not insurable, your first level of a stilt home, typically. There's always those, I have one right now. It's an X500 across the street from the water. And they have a bathroom that was permitted down there. They have an AC system permitted, that's usable space. I was very surprised. And I saw the permits, so we checked it out, we're good. Ask questions, right? Ask. And as Greg just said, we have some great resources here at KW, especially our insurance people, our mortgage people. Someone came to me yesterday with a scenario. I sent them to Van Dyke about new construction. That about buying the land, not buying the land. You do know if when you have a piece of land, you have to own it in order to build if you're doing it on your own. So you cannot get a mortgage for land by itself. It has to be cash. Now, there are people out there that will lend in private lending situations. That's what my buyer did. He went and found a private lender who gave him the money for the land with a short-term mortgage. Within a couple of years, he has to pay that off. You cannot have a lien on that land before you build. But some people don't know that. Now, some of the builders own the land and they're going to build. That's different versus you buying the land and calling Orange Blossom Builder.
Hey, can we talk a little, this is Jennifer on Zoom. I see a lot of that first level being built out, assuming that it's not, it's not reported and included in the square footage and all of those creative things people do with that first level living. Outside of insurance or not being able to get it insured, what other risk do you have if you were looking at a home that had done some building on that level?
If it's not insurable, you're just taking all the risks, basically.
So it's 100% related to insurance.
Well, it's rules and regs from the county as well. If it's not livable space, they should not be doing anything with it. So as I mentioned, it's something that if someone reports you that you are using that as livable space, the county will come in and have you tear everything out and then fine you.
Like if you put a bathroom in there or something, and someone found out and they came in, probably might have to rip that out. Kitchen, the bathroom, things like that.
So if you have a buyer and you see that, you have to have that discussion that this is not permitted. However, you're taking on that risk. Most of them don't care, to be honest with you, right? But have that conversation so that they don't assume that this is all okay.
There's certain places in Miami, you'll come into a place, it's a 6'2", like a 6'2", what went on here. So there has to be a sign off by the county. The county will come in and you can't close.
What's that mean, a 6'2"?
6 bedroom, 2 bath,
Okay.
and it's like, no, this was, this, it
In
says,
900 square feet?
yeah. And down there in public records, it tells you beds, unlike up here.
Right.
It says beds and baths, so you can kind of see, but you've got to get, title has to get a sign off from the county to make sure, but again, just to kind of piggyback on that, if
Right.
there's something done in there, just because it's yours, doesn't necessarily mean you can put a bathroom down there. I'm taking the risk. Great, but
Yeah.
again, somebody rats out, county
Right.
comes in.
So if it's not, if it's just a, like a creative living space, you see a lot of people doing, rec rooms and things like that. You don't include that in your, there shouldn't be an air conditioning in there either. Is that right?
Correct, because you're using it as living space and that's not permitted. That's not the intention of it. It's
Okay.
usually just meant to be a garage area.
Yeah. Okay. So it would never be included with the square footage of the home. It's
Right.
really a glorified patio, if you will.
It's an enclosed garage, is more or
Yeah.
less what it is. So when in doubt, take a look at the tax records. Do you ever see where it says base?
Yeah.
Finished? Look at those numbers. This is how you add it up, because if you're questioning, is there an area that wasn't included? That breakdown in the tax records will tell you. For example, if it's a 2,000 square foot home and the main level is 2,000, it's not including the first level, right?
There's different cases, like I think it's Oakley in Tarpon, they're off of Klosterman.
Right.
There's a little pocket of homes there where they're all like that, where there's 1,500 square feet upstairs, but there's a downstairs that's meant for, I have a client that's just pool table down there and like a little party room. So
Right.
you can look at the other ones in the neighborhood and it's like, okay, this is legit,
Right,
if you will, but doesn't mean that you can go down there and put a bathroom
Right.
and a kitchen and all that stuff.
right. And what you described sounds like a split level home.
Sure.
For any
Yep.
northerners, that's what we call it up north, split level. So that level was livable.
Yep.
And again, you'd find that out by looking at the tax records, because it does break it down into sections of square footage. And we could go on and on about that. And when you question, is that Florida room in the back, even though there is a register for the AC heat, was that done properly? Well, is it in permits? Is it in the square footage as livable? There's ways of looking that on the tax record.
Inspect those buckets.
You would hope.
There's no idea.
Yeah. Anyone else with questions?
There's no risk to the real estate agent for being a part of that transaction, right? It's just buyer beware.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you, again, don't mess with the square footage on the listing, don't go ahead and change it. But that is, I don't.
That's a trick question.
I work hard for those.
I'm going to say that you're the professional. I think we do carry risk. We're always carrying the risk, because if anything happens, guess who they're coming after first? The professional. So have that conversation. Have it in writing. We love to email our clients and say, just to make sure we're on the same page.
You understand.
You do understand that first level, because if it ever comes back when they get in trouble or the county comes after them, well, my realtor didn't tell me. You have something. But I will say, yes, it is your responsibility, because you are in the transaction. And if you know that is not a living space, you should be advising them that information or the resource to go and confirm it. I think we're always responsible at some point. because
Totally,
we have
yeah.
a license.
Just get it in writing.
Yeah.
But back it up with the writing, yeah.
Can I just ask them that? I know there was one on Boise side that I went to look at. Completely fitted out, bedrooms, kitchen, everything downstairs. And they said it was not included, but they did get insurance. But obviously it didn't include the bottom part, but they still got insurance. So how does that work? So the insurance will come in and just no damage below? Just, I don't know how that works. And
See, that's where it gets confusing. Now, I think it's misunderstood that they got insurance. They didn't get insurance for that first level. That's not the insured square footage. So especially in that community, they are flood zone AE. So that's an indicator in itself, right? AE is the worst. So that main level is not insurable. So the insurance companies are not coming out looking at that property most of the time. So they're just going by, okay, the main living area is 18, 20 feet above that garage area. So they may have had that nice little package down there, especially a bedroom down there. It's
Oh, I had a
definitely being used.
full, yeah, had everything down there. But, yeah, it was, sold and
Do you ever see the condos that are on Curlew and the Dunedin Causeway right there and Pirates Cove Marina? They sit at, that is a disaster in itself because that has Pirates Cove now has been dredged yearly. It's bad. It keeps filling up. That's why Pirates Cove is not really so much in business. They have some business, but smaller boats, right?
yeah.
So that community to the south that sits on that canal, they actually are including, well, they don't include the square footage on that first level. And that's an AE. And I know because I sold there like 19 years ago and I was a nervous wreck because I kept saying, this isn't insurable, right? It's not insurable. But in the MLS, they use that square footage, but in tax records, it's not. To this day, I don't know how, if they're still getting away with that, but I remember being a nervous wreck because it was really not the square footage that all the agents were promoting. So you should be doing your homework. Look at the tax records, look with what Linda Caruso listed this for and doubt me, check the information to make sure what I'm putting up is correct so that agents copy from other MLSs, right? They copy from the community. They copy from what was there before. How many times did you see the MLS? And this is in the IMAP tax records. The MLS square footage does not equal what the square footage tax records. Well, because the past agent sold it for that square footage. Well, I'm going to do the same.
It'll cost you on the appraisal too. Had a issue with that in the San Rufino condos down in Dunedin.
Yeah.
We had, my guy was like 800 square feet less. And I said, I can't list it. I said, I'm not gonna list it unless you put something in writing and show me. And he goes, well, you're not listing it for 800 square feet less. And he showed me the builder's plan. And then there were 3 more that same, in the same place that were where the agents went and they were overriding the square footage on the IMAP. So I felt comfortable with that. We had everything covered. Because again, coming out to the, with the appraisal time, that's huge. I mean, that's not 3 feet or whatever, 800 square feet on an $800,000 property. That's something you got to get out in front of. So again, what Linda's saying is don't wait until then, get out in front of it. And then again, you can have a serious conversation with the appraiser because he's going to come out, he's going to measure. And it's different. 20 square feet off.
So the appraisal and the inspection are pieces of the pie, of course, but I guess what my concern is if you are looking at a home and there's air conditioning down there and a half a bath or whatever, it's safe to assume that was not properly permitted, correct? Like you wouldn't get a permit to do any of that work down there.
Unless, like Linda was saying, in her case, there was a particular case where there were permits. So
They were, yeah. Okay.
If you're seeing AC, it's usually a window unit, isn't it? Down at that level?
Yeah, I've seen. I happen to show a lot of properties on Anna Maria Island to somebody who's looking and for a vacation investment property. And I mean, every main level was spectacular. I mean, living space and not acknowledged by most of the agents in their MLS stuff. But I just needed to understand a little bit more and need to understand a little bit more. I understood the insurance piece and the rules around how to build, but what I don't understand is what the risk of is buying something that wasn't handled properly or permitted properly and is now someone, the buyer's responsibility.
Right.
Come out. I mean, ultimately will come out.
It will. And it will come back to you as well, you and the listing agent. So just know this, if you walk in to a still home and you see that AC sticking out of a window, that's not real, it's not legit. And like the one I mentioned was a split system. Split system is that European model, and they had it in the wall. And as soon as I saw it, I said, is that permitted? And they said, yes. And then I was able to look it up and I found the permit form. So I was excited to promote that because that's unusual, right?
And again, the seller's disclosure, I mean, just start looking at everything.
And you know what? If you're working in new construction, you tend to learn a lot more too. When they build these still homes, what they do a lot of times is, if you ever see, you know, the switches, the outlets, like 10 feet high.
Yeah,
that's a
totally.
Indicator, that's
Yep.
an indicator, you're in a flood zone. But what a lot of people do, they get their certificate of occupancy and then they bring the plumber back in, build that bathroom, they put the kitchen in. That's all after the fact. And they're doing it because they know it's not legal. Because it would never pass their certificate of occupancy. Yeah. Anything else? Right on time. Is this helpful?
Yeah.
Good, good. All right. Well, if you have any other questions, let Greg or I know, and Greg or me, and we're there to help.